back to the Midnight Snack. I'm your host, Chef Adrian Minnis. Today we're going to be doing our first video of our bread bowl showdown. Today we're going to be using the Bountiful Beer Bread Box recipe, which just is taking the mix, putting a whole beer into it, 3 tablespoons of butter, mixing it around, pouring it into a pan, and then going into the oven for 50 minutes. Now, this bread looks kind of weird, it looks a little off. We're going to put it against one of my beer bread recipes for sourdough. So first, we're going to start off with putting 750 grams of all-white, unbleached, high-gluten flour into a bowl. Next, you want to put in 15 grams of salt. Then you want to add in 500 grams of your sourdough base. My sourdough base is now going on its 3rd month of fermenting, so it's very ripe. Then you want to use 250 grams of a very strong ale. I am using the Voodoo Ranger Experimental IPA. I'm only using 250 grams of the beer. There will be still about 125 grams left. You want to save that for later. Mix it into 100 grams of rye flour and let it ferment as a pate. Next, you want to put in 100 grams of tepid water. You may have to add in another 100 grams just depending on how dry the dough is. You want a wet, elastic dough. You do not want it dry and lumpy. Next, we're going to be mixing around the ingredients together. After the dough is hard enough a little bit to where your spatula is not able to go through the dough, we're going to take that and turn it onto an oiled surface. You do not want to use flour because it will dry up the dough. We want the dough as elastic and sticky as possible. Start kneading, spray your hands with a little bit of canola oil just to lubricate them up so the dough doesn't stick to your hands. But you're going to knead this dough for about 5 minutes in hand. I do it initially in the bowl and then I'll end up turning it onto the surface. I did speed up this by at least 20% so this way we can get through the kneading and you guys don't have to watch me knead for 5 minutes straight. Now we're going to be lubing up a bowl with a little bit of oil, putting in our sourdough ball, and we're going to let this rise for about 2 to 3 hours. Recipe. We're going to take that box of flour and we're going to put it right into this bowl. Instead of weighing out our beer, we're going to be dumping the whole 12 ounce into this bowl, and then also adding in our 3 tablespoons of melted butter. Now we're going to mix this by hand, and it says to only do it for about 20 to 30 seconds, and the dough will be lumpy, so we'll keep it lumpy, and we'll see how it goes. You would just want to put this on a baking sheet and form it out, but I did not want to form as I put it on a baking sheet, so I put it back into the bowl, lubed up this pan, this 9x5 pan, and I'm going to throw it in the oven like that. So as you can see, our 2 different doughs, one's lumpy, one's smooth. Now we're going to let this proof, turn on the oven to 375, and put that first ball of dough right into the oven. So you can see I'm going to show first dough, our sourdough, and then I'm also doing a personal Vermont rye sourdough for just bread for myself. I'll be doing a daily sandwich bread here very shortly. Okay, Google, set a timer for 50 minutes.
50 minutes.
And after 50 minutes, I'm pulling out the bread. See how this box bread did. Oh geez, that's very hot. Putting that down. I'm gonna switch out gloves because that one's a little bit wet. Now look at that bread. Looks pretty good, but I would not be considering this a bread bowl bread. It looks too dense, it looks lumpy, almost like a cornbread instead of a regular bountiful bread. Now we're going to take this ball that has been resting for about 3.5 hours so far. It is doubled in size and it's starting to look very nice and hefty. We're going to divide it in half and then we're going to just fold it into the rolls and then put it into a small ball onto the baking sheet. Now I hope you didn't finish that beer from earlier and you did mix it into 100 grams of rye flour, because we're going to be taking that pate and we're going to be spreading it across the top and the sides of the roll. You want to make sure it gets fully coated onto the sides. This is going to give us a good coloring and a good flavor on the outside of our crust, help it crisp us and help it give it that, you know, burnt sourdough look without it being burnt. And then of course we're going to be going into our bread and we're going to score it with an X. You can also do an on a sign, or you can do an ampersand, or you can do a star, or you can even dust it with flour and have a small slit just straight down the middle or off to the side. It's sourdough. You want to make sure that you cut the top of it so it doesn't burst open extremely, and make sure it's very airy on the inside. So you get to determine where you want to put your knife cuts.
Okay, Google, set a timer for 50 minutes.
An hour later, we're looking at our bread. You can see that pate has made a good crust on the outside. When you poke it, it's very, very hard. Our splits have made a good seam in the middle, just makes it very appetizing looking. Now look at those two loaves together. Back to back, the breads don't look all that terrible. I do believe that the sourdough looks a little bit better than the Bountiful beer bread, but I am still waiting to hear back on which one was better.